Also told to be on video.
You're the host?
No. I'm a panelist.
Just remove the video and say hello.
I remove the video.
Just remove the video.
This.
Remove it and then come in. Go to participants. Where is yours like this? Click. These are the people who are there already. So you can talk to them. Yes.
But why?
These are the people who are on.
So I can say hi.
Yeah.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah, so you'll be able to see that there are 21, not even those. There are 21 participants.
Yeah, there are more people. There are many people.
Yeah. So when you want to talk, just click here. Just close it. Don't put on your mic, I'm still on the meeting.
Which mic?
Don't put on your mic, I'm still on the meeting.
Hey, but they're about to start.
So I think it's finished by agreeing to our members.
Good morning, moderator. I'm Evan Staracha.
Oh, good morning, Taraja. How are you? Can you hear me? Morning, Buena Taraja. Are you good?
Good morning, Dr. Esther Matu.
Oh, she's there already. How are you, Dr.
Oh.
Good. Sorry. Good morning, Dr. Good morning,
Hi, how are you?
Mr. Moderator.
How are you? How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. My name
We're
is
getting
Esther
set up.
Matu.
We're getting set up. We'll be like 5 minutes late, but
That's
we should
fine.
be fine. We should be 5 minutes.
Good.
Yeah. Should be ready in 5 minutes time. It's good to see all of you. All excited. Mr. Barososio. Mheshimiwa, how are you?
Immediately after. Leji, kuruachi inyo.
Habari Mheshimiwa? Are you there? I can see your name at least. So everybody's here. Esther is here. Lerenten is here. Lerenten, how are you?
Hello,
Good, I'm good,
moderator.
good.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you.
Me too.
Guys are all coming in. Huh? We're flooding in now. Mheshimiwa is also, His Excellency is also here. Good to see you, Bwana Governor. Professor, I think you're here. Yes. All right. So we'll be setting up. We are just about to begin.
The volume is very low. You lower that.
Oh yes, I think it's good for everybody to test the volumes. Can we start with Dr. Taracha? Can we test your volume?
Good morning, moderator.
Good, good. That is a very good volume. Okay, Dr. Esther?
Yes.
Let's
Am
check
I
your
good
volume.
enough?
Your volume is good. Thank you. Bonaleren.
Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, moderator. Happy
good,
to be
good.
with
That's
you
a good volume.
this morning.
Thank you very much.
Uh,
Mheshimiwa Barsosio.
yeah.
He's not yet ready. Okay. Council of Governors, I believe, is yours. And then
Good morning, all of us.
good morning. Who
Good
is
morning.
that now? Who's speaking? Oh, Dwight Bonabarsosio. How are you?
Barsosio.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you
fine,
very
fine,
much.
Manik. Good to see you.
Your Excellency, can we test your volume? Whoever is there with him. Okay, still connecting. All right. All right. So, okay, I can see that this is ready. So I have two. So I need to remove this one, eh? Yeah, remove that one.
It will affect us.
I know. But you can't with your phone. You can't. Your volume will spoil for us. Okay. Great. So we should be able to start in the next minute or so. I'm hoping we can get. Okay. All right. So we're starting off with a video that will introduce us. Your Excellency, how are you, Professor?
Fine, thank you. Thank you. What's your name?
My name is Moniki Mageri. I am the moderator for today.
Thank you. Thank you. We're ready.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. And I'm quite impressed. I've been looking at your profile, and I am very, very excited that people have actually taken what shall we call it, indigenous knowledge very, very seriously. And what is interesting is that a lot of Kenyans do not know that there is so much knowledge out there. So I'm hoping that this webinar will enable us to understand how much knowledge is available and that can make a difference in people's lives in this country and probably beyond this country. Yeah. So we'll be playing a video from here at the Council of Governors. I'm sitting at the Council of Governors today. So they will play us a video to introduce everything, and then we shall start formally immediately after that. But I think all our all of us are here. All the panelists are here. We have done our voice tests, so we're happy. I'm happy about that. And I think we should be ready to go as soon as they play the video. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, karibuni sana. This is an Indigenous Knowledge pre-conference webinar being hosted by the Council of Governors. And the sub-theme is Enlivening and Integrating Indigenous Knowledge in Climate Action at the subnational level in the wake, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'd like to start with the national prayer, which is the national anthem. And immediately after that, we shall have the East African anthem. and then I will be able to introduce who the panelists are, and we'll get into the objectives and then move into questions. So if you'll allow us now, we'll start with the national anthem.
God of all creation, Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu, dunia yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike, umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you very much. That is the Kenya national anthem and the East African anthem. And as you can see, there are prayers to God to ask us to be able to work together and to empower us to be able to make a difference. And indeed, making a difference includes looking at the knowledge that we have been given, that it surrounds us, that is available around us. And this indeed includes indigenous knowledge. Now, I'd like to recognize our panelists today. And I'll first of all start with our chief guest. Our chief guest is His Excellency, Professor Paul Chepkwony, who is the governor of Kericho County, very famous county for tea, I believe, from a very long time ago when I was growing up. He is has Bachelor of Science in Chemistry major from JKUAT and a master's in chemistry at the University of Nairobi, and a PhD in organic chemistry back at JKUAT again. He also has done systems administration at the Variant Medical Systems Incorporated in Germany, and advanced chemical chemistry in Tianjin University of Traditional Medicine, China. So he is well renowned in the academic field, practicing 18 years as a professor at the University of Moy University, and has got an inventor. He's an inventor and an innovator. 43 publications, by the way, in referred journals, and that is quite a feat, and 13 patents across the world, 6 in the US patents, 4 European Union patents, 1 Kenyan patent, 1 South African patent, and 1 Japanese patent. So this is a gentleman who is very well versed in invention, in indigenous knowledge, and particularly he has something to his name, which is the invention of a herbal-based immune booster, which has been approved all the way in Philippines by the FDA there. He's a writer and an editor, and is on his second term as governor of Kericho, which means that he got the people's mandate twice to be able to be the governor. Thank you very much, sir. On the Council of Governors, he is the current chair of the Resource Mobilization and ICT Committee, having previously served in the Gender, Youth, Culture, Sports, and Social Services Committee for 6 years. So as you can see, our chief guest is the right person to be able to have here. Thank you very much, Professor, for taking time to be here with us. And I'm sure you will give us a lot of input on what we need to do as far as our sub-theme is concerned.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Next, I'd like to go to the next person on our list, and you can see the names there. The next person is Bona Lerenten, and Mr. Lerenten Loilekoitian. Lelekoitian is the Deputy Director, Climate Change Adaptation at the at the Climate Change Directorate, Ministry of Environment and Forestry. He is. This has the mandate to coordinate climate change adaptation in the country. He will tell us exactly how that works and what that is. He has a master's degree in environmental management from Flinders University in Australia, and a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource Management from Egerton University, and of course a diploma in indoor leadership skills, which is a really amazing. I've seen outdoor leadership skills from the National Outdoor Leadership School, Wyoming. I'm an advent fan of outdooring, and I know that this is a very, very big training that you have received, because out there anything can happen. And his experience spans both state and non-state organizations, and he is a member of the Environmental, Biological, and Agricultural Engineers, and of course also a member of Nature Kenya. He comes with a lot of experience. Thank you very much, Bonalaren. We know we met recently. It's a pleasure to meet you, and it's great for you to be a part of us here today. Asante sana. Next, of course, is the only lady on our panel, and we're being very gender sensitive. Daktari Esther Matu is a director, Center of Community-Driven Research, CDR, at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, which is KEMRI. She's a biomedic research scientist by profession, and works, of course, as KEMRI, as I've said. And the Center for Traditional Medicine and Drugs Research is one of the places she has worked before, and currently she heads, as I said, the Center of Community-Driven Research in the same institute. Her research focus is on indigenous medical systems and their role in medical care. She has been actively involved in the identification of novel indigenous innovations, and of course the documentation of indigenous knowledge and conservation of bioresources used in indigenous medical systems. Thank you very much, Madam Esther. Maybe you can wave, we can see you there. It's good to see you. Thank you very much. Mr. Evans, Dr. Evans Nagoya Taracha is a graduate in veterinary medicine from the University of Nairobi, and also has done immunology in the University of Birmingham, and went to later on to University of Brunel in the Department of Biochemistry, and has a PhD in parasite immunology. He is currently, he has also done other certificates, including strategic leadership at Kenya School of Government, and executive bio-entrepreneurship from Strathmore Business School. He is currently the National Coordinator, Natural Products Industry Secretariat, Nairobi, and also the Chief Research or Principal Research Scientist at the National Museums of Kenya, and brings in a lot of knowledge and experience on natural knowledge, on indigenous knowledge, sorry. Thank you so much, Dr. for being here. Wave, let us see you somewhere. Thank you very much. Great to see you, sir. Then I would like to now go to Mr. Stanley Kimaren Oleriamit. I think you're there, yes. Mr. Oleriamit is an indigenous peoples leader from the pastoralists Maasai community in southern Kenya. Now, he's a founder director of Indigenous Livelihoods Enhancement Partners, which is a community-based indigenous peoples organization, and that is working with indigenous pastoralist communities related to their concerns as pastoralists. He's a holder of master's degree in development anthropology and a postgraduate diploma in project planning and management, and a Bachelor of Science degree in foods, nutrition, and dietetics. Let's see, he is also interested in anthropology of development and human rights, governance, and indigenous knowledge systems. He's primarily interested in discourses or discussions and practices of development institutions, and how development is affecting grassroots communities in Africa. Thank you very much, Mr. Oleriamit. We can have you wave there. There, can I see? Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Last but not least is the Honorable CEC from yes, Honorable CEC community. He's the member. He's this, and now CEC stands for County Executive Committee Member for Waterlands, Environment, and Physical Planning. Honorable Abraham Barsosio I can see there, young gentleman who actually became a CEC at the age of 28. Very well done. That's a huge achievement, sir. Karibu sana. He holds a Master's of Science in Natural Resource Management and has 8 years experience in policy and technical advisory roles in management, social and environmental safeguards, and design and implementation, partnership, policy analysis, development, and implementation on resource mobilization. So as you can see, he's vastly experienced. He's currently pursuing his PhD, which I'll soon be calling him doctor in environmental planning and monitoring. He is, as he tells us, got great analytical and writing skills, and he's been able to take his oath of office, as I told you, at the young age as of 28 years. He's married and has got 2 boys. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Please wave once again, Mheshimiwa. And you need to tell me, I have not been told, I think I have it somewhere, but yes, sorry, Elgeyo Marakwet County. Yes, from Elgeyo Marakwet County. Sorry, I had not been able to see that. I think those are our panelists. And one more time, maybe just take one nice wave, everybody. Say hello to everyone who's listening to us. Okay. Okay, all right. Now I understand we would like to have a formal introduction. And I would like to invite our CEO. Yes, one second, please. 1 second, please. I understand we do have shall I call her our host, Mrs. Jacqueline Mogeni. She is the CEO at the Council of Governors. I would like to invite her now. She has to make a formal welcome and introduce our chief guest, Madam Jacqueline Mogeni. Our CEO. All right. I can see her name there. I can see her name there. So when she's ready, we shall be able to have her come and say welcome, because indeed this is definitely a very exciting time that we're able to use things like internet and webinars like this to encourage participation from people from all walks of life and from all and sundry. In fact, I was sharing let me just say this. I was sharing the theme with some friends of ours, and they were like, "That is so technical. It's so way up there." So maybe someone can be able to break it down for us a little. Okay, break it down for us a little and just tell us. And I will ask one particular person, what exactly is indigenous knowledge? And okay, all right. So I understand Rosemary has also joined us. Rosemary, are you there? Rosemary
Yes,
Jaramba
I'm here.
is in charge.
I'm here.
Oh, good. All right. Okay, we'd like you to introduce. All right, we'd like you to introduce the governor to give his official statement.
Thank you, Maniki. My name is Rosemary. I work at the council. I'd like to just welcome everyone to this webinar on indigenous knowledge. I think it's an exciting topic. It's an exciting discipline that we're able to have these discussions when we are dealing with climate change and COVID-19. So it's just to say welcome to everyone. We're very excited to have you here. We are looking forward to very constructive and very fruitful deliberations for the next about 1 hour and 40 minutes. And at this point, I'll just allow His Excellency, the Governor, Professor Paul Chepkonyi, to say something to come and open the webinar for us and set the pace for the webinar. Would like to say thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us. We really appreciate your presence in this webinar today. So over to you, Your Excellency. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Roslyn. I hope you are all listening to me.
Yes, we are.
Yes, Your
yes, we
Excellency,
are.
we can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
are right here. We can hear you very clearly.
Thank you very much, distinguished speakers, national government and county government representatives, partners, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
So
Good morning, sir.
Greetings to all who have joined us this morning. I hope you are all keeping well and safe in this difficult period. And on behalf of the Council of Governors, we appreciate your presence in this webinar, and we look forward to constructive discussions around this exciting topic of Indigenous knowledge. I'm very much at home with this particular topic, so let's flow with it. I like the moderator, is set the pace very well, and I look forward to very exciting engagement with all of you. I am personally very thrilled that policymakers at both levels of government are starting to take this conversation on Indigenous knowledge more seriously. We are living at a time when governments are dealing with double tragedy, the adverse impacts of both climate change and pandemics like COVID-19. In the African continent, climate change continues to hit the most vulnerable hardest and is contributing to food insecurity, population displacement, and stress on water resources. In Kenya, for example, we have witnessed devastating floods, an invasion of desert locusts, and droughts that have left populations in utter poverty. The human and economic toll of climate change has been aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the strategies that policymakers have begun to put more consideration into is the application of Indigenous knowledge. Slowly, it is emerging that traditional knowledge can be a catalyst for building community resilience to climate change and emerging diseases like COVID-19. By relying on biodiversity and natural resources, Indigenous communities have acquired immense knowledge of the resources, e.g. food, forest, medicine, and water around them. Indigenous people have extensive knowledge on wildlife, plants, land use patterns, seasons, climate, water, and soil. But often, governments and development partners have ignored Indigenous knowledge in development of climate change programs and projects. The result is that some initiatives fail to take off due to lack of integration of traditional knowledge and local resources. The infusion of traditional knowledge with modern technologies in climate action is critical for these reasons. One, it helps both state and non-state actors to generate programs and projects that create a balance between being able to satisfy demand for local goods, e.g. food, water, fuel, medicinal and cosmetics products and construction materials, and demand for global public goods, e.g. climate change mitigation and adaptation initiatives and natural resource conservation. Two, it guarantees that traditional resources, ideas, goals, and aspirations of local communities are recognized while designing climate action programs and projects. Three, not all countries have the capacity to deal with the impacts of climate change using sophisticated technology. In this regard, such countries are able to draw climate change solutions from available Indigenous knowledge. Capitalizing on traditional knowledge can lead to the development of effective mitigation and adaptation strategies that are cost-effective, participatory, and sustainable. Flowing from above, we now see why the Paris Agreement acknowledges that, I quote, adaptation action should follow a country-driven, gender-responsive, participatory, and fully transparent approach, taking into consideration vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems, and should be based on and guided by the best available science and as appropriate traditional knowledge, knowledge of indigenous peoples, and local knowledge systems. End of quote. To bring this closer home, the Constitution of Kenya at Article 11.2b stipulates that, quote, the state shall recognize the role of science and indigenous technologies in the development of the nation, end of quote. Article 69(1)(c) of the Constitution of Kenya goes further to espouse that, and quote, the state shall protect and enhance intellectual property in and indigenous knowledge of biodiversity and the genetic resources of the communities, end of quote. Therefore, the national government and county governments have an international and constitutional commitment to shape climate action through application of indigenous knowledge. Let me say that we are making small steps. The creation of the Natural Products Industry Initiative program by the National Museums of Kenya and the inclusion of a representative of the marginalized community who has knowledge and experience in matters relating to indigenous knowledge in the National Climate Change Council are positive measures being adopted to enliven indigenous knowledge in climate action. But more needs to be done. Both levels of government need to seriously consider doing the following. Number one, setting up clear structures of integration that will facilitate identification of traditional knowledge holders and link them with the policymakers. Number two, increasing the capacity of policymakers so that they can appreciate the important role indigenous knowledge plays in climate action. And three, establishing mechanisms that will support regular and systematic documentation of indigenous knowledge in order to secure intergenerational transfer of this knowledge. I trust the discussions here today will produce concrete recommendations that we can carry to the upcoming devolution conference. I am glad that finally indigenous knowledge is receiving national attention, since we need to tap into its benefits as we seek to build resilience to climate change and pandemics like COVID-19. I wish you all fruitful deliberations, and I say asanteni sana, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. As you said, this is an area that you're very well versed, and you've been able to guide us in some of the thoughts that we need to do. And then you talked about biodiversity and how we need to build that, and even the Constitution talks about that. So that is quite an honor to have you here, and quite exciting that we'll be able to discuss this together. The lady, Rosemary Jaramba, is the head of planning and strategy, knowledge management and monitoring and evaluation here at the Council of Governors. That's the lady who introduced you. And thank you very much, Rosemary, also for doing so. Now, I would like to get into a bit of a discourse, and I would like that I know we will be very technical, and we can be very technical, but I would like us to break it down, because I'm assuming that we're going to be having a lot of the public joining us, and have already started joining us, as I can see. Many of them would not know some of the terms that we are using: biodiversity, climate action, indigenous knowledge, very big words. and sometimes we want to carry them along so that we can be able to make a difference, particularly in this part, or this time when we have access to information and access to gadgets like this, and be able to carry everybody along. So I'd like to start with Honorable Barsosio, and maybe you can, from your perspective and from your thoughts, what do you think, or how do you perceive this indigenous knowledge and climate action and biodiversity? How do you see us being able to attempt to challenge this?
Thank you so much, Mwaniki, Your Excellency. I want to appreciate your being here, and we really appreciate you as our chief guest today. Mwaniki, just to break this into that perspective that everybody can be able to walk along with us, if allowed, then I can bring maybe around three scenarios in which participants can be able to understand well when we talk of indigenous knowledge and in the perspective of climate change issues. I take you to Mount Kulal in Marsabit, where there is a forest called Mount Kulal Forest, which is a gazetted forest under Kenya Forest Service. But if you look at its management, it is purely managed by wazee wa mazingira, which means these are people who never even went to school, but they are able to conserve and do protection and management of that forest. And I was there some few months ago, and even to collect firewood, women to collect firewood, you have to go and face the wazee wa mazingira. That is the application of the indigenous knowledge within the people around Mount Kulal in terms of doing protection. There is not even a single KFS officer to manage or to man that forest, but it is one of the best in this country. Come here to the border of West Pokot and Elgeyo Marakwet and Baringo, where we have water furrows that are made by people. It is dated to over 500 years ago. And if you happen to fly over that region, the region of Embobut and Tot, as you go to West Pokot and Tiati, where we border one another. If you look at the meandering water furrows and how they are made by people who never went even to school. His Excellency has talked about the sophisticated equipment, knowledge, and capacity that we might not be having as a country. But if you look at, if you ever fly across or over that region, you will see very beautiful biodiversity of various species of trees that are green throughout the year in all seasons. Whether it is a dry season, it is very green with very good trees because of the water furrows that are being used in Kerio Valley to do irrigation. We produce a lot of mangoes in that region. There is now instability in terms of security in that region because of such indigenous knowledge. Lastly, the meteorological department in our county, there are hills, the Tuken Hills and the Elgeyo Hills. And the director in charge of meteorological department in this county cannot be able to predict certain climatic conditions or weather conditions without bringing in the wases from these communities. And they are able to look at the stars. They are able to look at the behavior where the shadow of a certain hill, the direction of the shadow of a certain hill very early in the morning. They wake up at around 3 a.m. in the morning just to look at the characteristics that we have maybe in the sky. How are the stars behaving? How is the moon behaving? The weather, how is it the climatic conditions? And they are able to integrate this with the knowledge that we got from school using some of the sophisticated materials, and you'll find that it blends very well. Like today, they were telling us today it might rain in this region, and they are all signs that for sure it will be able to rain maybe today in North Rift. Those are some of the indigenous knowledge that we have. Look at the way they are using some of these tree species to cure several other ailments and diseases in this region. That is the indigenous knowledge, which even as scholars, it has enabled us to take some of these herbs that they're using, and we take them to the lab and we see what are these that these people know. They never went to any class, and they're able to tell us a lot in terms of indigenous knowledge and how the climate is changing. And they're able to tell us that in the next few years, this will happen. And it is true. Global warming is a real issue. And if we talk with these people who are full of this indigenous knowledge, they can be able to tell us a lot. Back to you, Monique.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. That is very telling that the old wazes and the people there have knowledge that can be passed on to other people and be actually even documented and make a difference in the way that we live and the way that we're able to work with in our environment and conserve our environment. I would like to ask Bonalerenten and I think Madam Dr. Matu also, please hold on, be ready for this as well. What are the gaps, therefore, if there exists knowledge from the communities and from different people that are on the ground? what is the gap there is between what they're doing and how we know that this knowledge is available and why this knowledge is helpful to us. What are the gaps? What are the opportunities that we can also be able to exploit and utilize? Bonalenten, maybe you can let us know what you think and what is the government doing to be able to bridge that gap? Are you with us, Bonalenten? I can't hear you. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I not unmute. Okay, thank you very much, moderator and my colleagues. I'm very happy the way His Excellency has introduced the topic already, setting the stage, and of course, Barsos has really grounded it on indigenous knowledge and why it's very important. Yeah, I think one of the biggest gap we have currently is that despite the fact that we have this very rich knowledge that is critical for us, especially to adapt to climate change, there's very little in terms of documenting and archiving that information and packaging it in a way that we're going to utilize it now and also for the future generations. And I think it's an area that we need to tighten up and make sure that we really document this information and archive it in a way that is going to be useful. If you look at the examples given by Barsocio, actually there is a real practical knowledge that is very relevant back then and even now. And there's need to see how we can leverage on that knowledge to enhance our resilience to climate change. If you look at general conservation, there's a lot of knowledge with the indigenous people to conserve. And the new direction you're taking, even globally in terms of building resilience, we are looking at nature-based solutions. What are these solutions that are there naturally that we can tap in to make us resilient to climate change? And most of these will benefit a lot from the already existing rich knowledge of the local communities. So that's one of the biggest gaps. The next one is we don't seem to give indigenous knowledge the attention it deserves. You find that even as we craft the policies, the programs, we tend to go so much to what's coming from outside, and we tend to ignore what we already have within ourselves. That is really, really important. So how do we make sure that going forward, we integrate and mainstream in traditional knowledge in everything we do, in the policies and in the program and projects going forward? Yeah, let me stop there for now and maybe allow my colleague to add. Thank you very much.
Yes, Madam Matu, do you want to add?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And thank you, colleagues, and thank you also for inviting me to this webinar. I think if I could just add up to what my colleague has said, one thing we acknowledge is that and if I can talk from an academic angle, the issues of IK are normally introduced at the higher institution level. And as a result, there is a lot of skepticism on the role of IK in all aspects of development. And as a result, many people are not aware of what role it can play in social development, whether it comes to issues of climate change or its application in health and agriculture and nutrition security. So I think that to me, that has been one of the weakest links, that we need to incorporate issues of IK at low levels of curricula, even starting from primary school level, secondary school level. We don't have to wait until it's at graduate level. Besides that, one of the other issues is that regardless of the many legislations and policies that are there governing issues of IK, there's very poor implementation. And most of the IK legislation and policies are on preservation and conservation. There's very little on validation or scaling up so that they have application in day-to-day living. And not unless people can see the value on their day-to-day living, then IK just remains there, being held by few people down the pyramid, but it is not being utilized. I can give an example of herbal medicines. Much as we know that before the advent of modern medicine, people relied on herbal remedies, that was being administered by traditional medical practitioners. However, with the advent of diseases like COVID-19 that have no known cures, it is imperative that we must go back, because if you look at even what is being managed to manage COVID-19 right now, it's other drugs that are used to treat other conditions. So we need to ask our questions, because diseases like pneumonia have always been there. Issues of respiratory infections have always been there. What are the indigenous people using to manage those conditions? And is there anything that we can tap into? Institutions and either the academic institutions and research institutions have done a lot of effort in documenting that, but that just remains in the libraries. It has not been taken up. And so I think the major gap here is that the policymakers need to be very deliberate, ensure that they provide enough funding so that the documented information can now be scaled up into innovations that can be tapped into. Yeah, I think that's what I would want to say for now.
Thank you very, very, very much. I think you.
Can I
Yes,
add
yes,
one?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think another big gap currently is the fact that we are not really protecting this indigenous knowledge. The aspect of biopiracy, where people come and tap into this knowledge and actually use the knowledge for commercial purposes. So what's happening is that we are losing out and losing out from benefiting from this indigenous knowledge. So as a country, I think it's an area that also we need to tighten up and see how we can patent this knowledge and how we can protect this knowledge. And if we agree on protecting or exploiting this knowledge, how does it benefit the common Mwananchi, the originator, and the person who has conserved this knowledge all these years? So I think it's another gap that we really need to tighten up. Thank you very much.
Dr. Taracha, I think following up on what Bernard Laurentien has said, protecting our indigenous knowledge, and I believe it is the work of the National Museum to document and archive this knowledge. Is there access to it, and is it protected once it is archived? Maybe you can let us know, Dr. Taracha, and is there more that we can do?
Thank you very much, moderator, and His Excellency, the Governor, for those opening remarks, and my colleagues. In response to the question as to whether we have mechanisms in place already geared towards protecting and securing our enormous indigenous knowledge resources in this country, I have the following to say, moderator. First of all, as His Excellency the Governor clearly laid it out in his remarks, it all begins with our Constitution 2010 and giving sufficient emphasis on the importance, first of all, recognizing the importance of culture and the need to protect it. Now, cascading from the Constitution, moderator, we now have a national legislation called Protection of Traditional Knowledge and Cultural Expressions Act 2016, as amended in 2018. Now, this is a framework that is very critical that the government has put in place that aims at, first of all, recognizing the importance of traditional knowledge, promoting it, but more importantly, and relevant to the question you've raised, how to conserve it. Now, I will not go really in the details of it, except to bring out the following. Recognizing that most aspects of culture have been devolved, leaving national government with a national policy, research, and capacity building. What this act lays out very clearly is that there has to be deliberate intergovernmental cooperation between the national government and the county governments in terms of protecting indigenous knowledge. And what that means, moderator, is that the county governments will be empowered and do the actual documentation, but empowered through training and capacity building by national government officers. And I'll be talking about this later on when I answer the question that National Museums has been asked. Now, when they document, when county governments document after being empowered, they would secure this indigenous knowledge in what they call indigenous knowledge registers. Now, a register is not just a hard copy document, no, it's digital repositories. So when it is stored in the indigenous knowledge register, a copy of that shall be deposited in what we're calling the national digital repository, which would be located somewhere in one of the national government institutions at the national museums or at the archives. Now, given that structure, given that mechanism, it is hoped that the country shall be able, first of all, in a structured way, identify indigenous knowledge wherever it exists, define it properly, and then store it within the boundaries of the county government that it is identified, and then a copy of it deposited with the national digital repository. So that is the structure. And what we're doing at the moment already, I'll be laying it out later on if I'm given a chance, is that we have embarked on a robust program of empowering county governments through training of selected personnel from those county governments, particularly from the departments of culture, department in charge of culture, department in charge of environment, department in charge of health, department in charge of agriculture. And along with them, also identify people from the community, the local community, who, like the local community leaders, and more importantly, and that is very important, young people whom we are molding to become champions of culture and indigenous knowledge. So we have already started programs of training in the skills of documentation of indigenous knowledge and how to store it. But beyond that, utilization as my colleague, Dr. Esther Matu said. So we have done, how many counties now? Almost 21 counties now. And in fact, the next county government to train would have been Kericho, where His Excellency the Governor, who is our chief guest, comes from, but COVID struck. Yes, and so we have been paralyzed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was actually going to be my next question, whether we're able to, even if we conserve it and preserve it and store it, are we able to utilize it? And I would like to hear from Mr. Kimmerer. You know, he's on the ground with the communities. But Kimmerer, this knowledge that the people that you work with have, do you see it moving on from generation to generation? Is it something that is passed on? Have you reserved it and preserved it with the archives? Tell us about your experience. Karibu Bwana Kimmerer.
Thank you very much, Magaria, and a very good morning to all my distinguished panelists here. Appreciating His Excellency the Governor for those very grounding and insightful opening remarks, and the other sobering comments by my fellow panelists. I can only but add a little more. Now, first, I think for me, indigenous knowledge is a foundation for all knowledge systems. It is a root for all knowledges because it preceded formal class knowledge. When my brother Barsosio becomes a PhD holder in natural resource management, he will certainly have to consult the indigenous knowledge holders and elders too. This knowledge is intergenerational. It is accumulated over generation. It is based on observation. It is tested and tried. And I want to respond to a few, put on the table some of the stereotypes that have complicated the sustainable application and recognition of indigenous knowledges. One is the stereotype that indigenous knowledge is archaic knowledge, that it is knowledge of yesterday. And I've asked Dr. Turasha before, why in Kenya they have put indigenous knowledge in the museums? Could it perhaps betray the prevailing notion that this is knowledge that should be preserved as opposed to active knowledge? This knowledge is vibrant, it is questioned, it is refreshed and renewed through collective holding by communities. And so one of the challenges that indigenous knowledge has faced is these stereotypes that it is static knowledge. And this is, and nothing can be further from the truth. This is vibrant, tested, tried, grounded knowledge. So my comments will relate a little more on the nature of this knowledge. The second comment is that this knowledge is practical. This knowledge relates to livelihoods. And the way the modern or formal Western knowledge is structured is knowledge is separated from practice. So you have abstract knowledge, but this knowledge is applied in daily livelihoods. The Western knowledge, one of the challenges is that, and why actually indigenous knowledge is facing challenges, it is collectively generated, reciprocally shared among communities, but Western knowledge is privatized, individualized through authorship. It is commodified and commercialized. And so if there is a knowledge system that competes with system knowledge that is attached to profits and gains for individuals, that knowledge must be silenced. And this is really one of the challenges of the indigenous knowledge system is facing, that because of the issue of patency and ownership and privatization of knowledge systems, indigenous knowledge is pushed to the periphery. The third comment is really that most scholars, current scholars, including some of us, are abstracted and are becoming aliens from nature. They are visitors to ecosystems. They are not living these experiences. So they are taught a theory in class and they go to do generic questions in the field. But when you look at our communities, for example, the pastoralist communities, where literacy levels are at 40%, at best 50%, you must ask the questions, how are they sustaining their livelihoods? In Kenya, 80% of our land is arid and semi-arid lands. What is keeping these lands productive? What is sustaining communities and livelihoods in this landscape? It is the indigenous pastoral knowledge of managing the rangelands, tested and tried. My brother Basosio mentioned, this knowledge is integrated knowledge. People and nature are inseparable. And so this fragmentation of knowledge we see in Western ways of knowing, of the forestry not talking with the water, of the water not talking with the land, of the land not talking with KWS, wildlife, indigenous knowledge is holistic, integrated people-nature relation. And unfortunately, nature itself is weaved into a harmony of interrelations, which Western ways of knowing breaks into silos and creates an artificial space for knowledge. And so I think these unique attributes of indigenous knowledge systems complicates it for those who want to quick fix, privatize it, and take it to the market. Mm. And so I want to say that Dr. Esther mentioned the issue of indigenous medicine. The average access distance to hospital in my community is 65 kilometers. Mm. So you must ask the question, in some remote areas of the community, how are they surviving? How are their health needs addressed? And you cannot help but recognize that the idea that communities don't make sense of the environment, that they are just waiting for visitors to come and interpret their experiences, is a very problematic view. So I want to say that this discussion will not have come at a better time, because the world will be a better place if these knowledge systems speak to each other. If science brings its uniqueness and indigenous knowledge system brings its uniqueness and inform each other, and without devaluing, demeaning any form of knowledge system, the world will be a better place if these knowledge systems speak to each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Banakimaran. I think, yes, would you like to say something?
Yes, moderator.
Yes, Dr. Taracha.
Yes, just to say something very briefly to add to build on what my colleague Cameron has just said. In the quest to recognize the importance of IK and put it to proper use, prudent use. In fact, that is the very, very concept behind this natural products industry Vision 2030 flagship project. It is premised on recognizing the importance of indigenous knowledge systems and how they can drive market-oriented innovations in Kenya. So it is actually the central plank is that central core in the natural products industry Vision 2030 flagship project. We feel that through this program, national government is at least for once giving sufficient attention to the importance of indigenous knowledge. And it in fact creates an interface. On one hand, indigenous knowledge and associated natural resources, and on the other hand, modern science and business expertise. So you create an interface. That's actually just emphasizing what my colleague Kimarin has said and the others have said.
I think what has really come out for me, yes, feel free to interject at any point, panelists, because this is a discussion. Go ahead, Wanda Basosio. Just before you say your point, I just want to say, what I've gotten from Bwana Kimbaran is that we should not segregate the knowledge from the actual practice. We need to utilize it needs to be an ongoing. It is part of life. It is not something that is kept in a book. In fact, they say in Kenya, if you want to hide something from people, just put it in a book, and they will never find it. So the idea is it should be part of life, and it grows. It is alive. It is changing. It is innovating even as time goes on. So I think that is a very important point, and I would like a professor to give us some of his inputs on that. So please prepare, Professor. But Honorable Basosio, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mwanike. Very insightful remarks from the panelists. And this brings me to the issue of sustainability in terms of the utilization of some of the resources that we have as a country. And the problem with us as a country is we have that tendency of we've commercialized everything. Look at how we've invested into our rivers, into our tributaries, just to make something worth, or we make some money into our pockets. And these are some of the things that are short-lived. And if you look, sometimes it provokes me, and it leaves me asking myself a lot of questions that, what is this? So some years ago, we could get the lifespan of human being was a little bit longer, but today it has been shortened. The kind of lifestyle diseases that we have in this country and globally nowadays, all these are attributed towards, I don't want to say the civilization, but we've left the indigenous kind of knowledge that we used to have, and we've adopted a different lifestyle altogether. And if you look at, even you go to a county like Baringo, Lamu, and Taita Taveta, where we have Prosopis juliflora as an invasive species, Lantana camara, among others, other invasive species. Look at the case scenario of Baringo, where men went to court. The people from Baringo went to court on the issue of Prosopis juliflora or Mathenge, which was killing or removing teeth from their livestock. And we, those ones, if we've gone to school and we want to put a lot of scientific knowledge on it, and we forget totally differently about what indigenous knowledge could have done in the issue. And you remember why Mathenge came to Baringo is because of the Moi protection of Momonyoko wa Udongo those days. And I think that this is an issue that we really need to be serious about it. And in everything that we do, let us try to integrate a lot of indigenous knowledge. I'm happy about the preparation of this country as a RED plus already. RED is a reduction in emission as a result of degradation and deforestation and degradation. And if we can be very serious as a country and bring in this issue, because I looked at the model and for sure it is bringing everybody on board. And this one again brings me to the question, Mwaniki, of the indigenous communities, the marginalized communities, the minority communities, and their place in terms of bringing some of this indigenous knowledge and what they know. Look at how proud we are as a country with the Maasai community and the way they dress, the way they behave, the way they conduct themselves. And it is, for us as a country, we take pride in Maasai. You go abroad and everybody wants to come to this country just to see how the Maasai, the Samburus behave. It is an issue of if we can be able to maintain what we know or the indigenous kind of knowledge that we have. The constitutional caps that we have in this country. As much as I know Kenya we are very good in terms of documentation. And Mwaniki, you just said if you want to hide something, just put it in books. We have very good laws, we have very good policies, but the biggest issue in this country is implementing some of these policies. Back to you, Mwaniki.
Thank you. I think Dr.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, who's jumping in?
Kimaren wants to jump in.
Yes, Kimaren, yes, go ahead, sir, go ahead.
So thank you again, and sorry for coming in too soon before somebody.
No, it's okay. This is a discussion.
But I just wanted to follow from associate a few things. So a few examples of how this indigenous knowledge is sometimes ahead of science. For years, traditional fire management in the landscape has been condemned as ill-informed. But now in Australia, there is a traditional fire management government-sponsored initiative. It took scientists and state operatives centuries to come to where indigenous people were 100 years before. That actually traditional fire management, well-timed, well-targeted, can yield not only carbon sequestration potential for climate change, but manage and control certain insects like ticks and so on, and refresh pasture in the landscape. The reading of intestines in weather forecasting, for example, these elders had learned over time to associate the roughness of internal intestines of goats on anticipated rains. It took scientists years to realize these are microbes, for some reason, coming back from the inside to the surface in anticipation of a wet season to burst within the intestines. And now I think some counties, I don't know whether it's actually Baringo County, I'm not sure, that is incorporating elders with the meteorological, so that you need to combine these sciences to be able to shape the future. When you look at how the Maasai observe the flora and fauna, the behavior of trees and plants and flowering plants and animals in anticipating short-term durations of rains that is not far, this knowledge is real. This knowledge is tested and tried, as I said before. I've seen a question on the chat about how to integrate institutions, that the challenge is about institution. So one of the challenge we are seeing now is tokenism in recognizing indigenous knowledge system, okay? Okay, put it in the constitution. We have it, Article 11. The governor said, His Excellency, 69, we have it. Put it in law. We have the Traditional Knowledge Act Dr. Tarasha mentioned. But what does it mean in reality for communities? If we stop there, it is just ink on paper. We need to put resources, to put time and energy to make it work, because we have lost time for years. And so when we create institutions like the Climate Change Council, which has an Indigenous community representative, and the council has not operated for 4 years, we are losing opportunities. So the Indigenous knowledge holders need to come to the table and talk with the scientists. They should not be filler material. They should be active ingredients of this knowledge engagement exchange. We should not just go to them as interviewers, as responded to questions of researchers. Thank you.
That is very, very, very crucial there. I think.
Yeah. Can I jump in?
You can. I want the Honorable Governor to also prepare himself to jump in, because I'm sure he will give us a lot of input there. And I wanted to say, just before you talk, Bonalaren, because I like that interaction, is that Dr. Esther alluded to the fact that we need to start teaching IK from a very early stage, even from primary level, probably even earlier. If we do not practice it from early, in fact, they say teach a child the way they should go, and when they grow up, they will not forget it. I think it's if we are able to teach it from an early stage and have it introduced earlier, it would make a lot of sense. I don't know what your input is on that. Bonalenten, I will allow you to go. Then I would like to ask our chief guest to make some insights on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. I really want to appreciate the rich information coming out of this discussion. I think it's very helpful. Yeah, I just want to add something and relate this traditional knowledge to building resilience or adaptation to climate change. You find that, the traditional people have always gone through these shocks, droughts and floods. And over time, they have developed how to survive through them. And just to give an example of what's happening currently, you find that in terms of livestock, people are going more to these breeds that are, healthy feeders. They grow very fast and give you more money. But they forget that these breeds are not well adapted to the to our environment. And over time, you find that our indigenous breeds are really facing extinction as we adopt these improved or hybrids. And you find that as climate change continues to affect us, the droughts are becoming intense and more frequent. The improved breeds are not coping very well. We need to conserve that gene pool of our indigenous animal species, cows, goats, and sheep. The same applies to crops. You find that we are moving away from our traditional crops, and now we call them orphans, the orphan crops, the millet, the sorghum, and all that. What's happening is that over time, we are losing them. And yet, these are the crops that will be very relevant, well adapted, and provide food security going forward, even with intense, drought events. So, and currently, what's happening also in terms of human health, we find more people are moving back to cassava. You prefer having your cassava or sweet potato in the morning, or having your millet, because they are coming up of lifestyle diseases. But we are losing these crops as much as we are realizing how important they are. So I think it's good for adapting to the changing climate, that we go back to our indigenous traditional crops and make sure that we preserve them for our posterity. And also this the environmental impact of intensive production systems. Okay. You find that if you have to grow beef cattle, you have to give them a lot of these supplements, feeds, soybean, And currently in the world, you find that soybean specifically is destroying the Amazon because big chunks of land is being cleared to grow soybean, and most of that soybean is going to feed livestock for beef. So it's all a chain that you have to look at and realize that you have to value and go back to our traditional species. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I just say something?
Yes. Esther. Go ahead, Daktari.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to concur with my colleagues that the linkage between the indigenous knowledge holders and the scholars and the policymakers actually is the weakest link. But I'm convinced that the devolved units have the best opportunity to ensure that they take this up. And I can give an example of what the Laikipia government is doing. Every year they hold the Indigenous Technologies Fair, where they invite all the indigenous holders into a forum, and they bring in the policymakers and other players in the sector, and they have a conversation. Because I think if I look at the constitutions of the panelists this morning, none of us is on the ground. It would have made a lot of us, well, in my opinion, I think it would have made a lot of effort. One of the panelists was a typical indigenous holder, and I think we need to speak their language. We need to identify what are their needs, so that we are not prescribing something that probably is not needed on the ground. So maybe I would want to hear from the governor, Prof, to understand what is he doing, because I know some counties are making an effort, but I think that is the only way we are going to do it, so that we go down there and we don't describe a very bitter pill, and probably that's not what they want. Yeah, thank you very much, colleagues.
Like that. The good thing is that Bonakimaren is actually on the ground himself. He is an indigenous person from community completely, and that's why I think you can see giving very, very practical advice there. But the challenge has been made to the counties.
No, Mwaniki, we are on the ground. I'm in Iten, we are on the ground.
You're also on the ground. Yes, you give very good examples. I'd like to hear from our chief guest, Honorable His Excellency, the governor from Kericho. Are you there, sir? What did you think of our discussion so far, and what insights are you gleaning, or would you like to redirect us?
Thank you, Coordinator. I have listened very carefully, and I have found that the panelists are very, very knowledgeable, and they can bring about revolution in this country in terms of protecting our genetic material, as well as any other product in our country. The focus that I have been having on this discussion is to get to understand whether there is a gap in how to protect these particular innovations. And this is where I chip in. What we need, all this said and done, is that any invention must be protected. And any invention must be protected through having a patent. And a patent can only be possible for a product which is innovatable. And there are two characteristics of a product that is patentable. It must be new, it must be non-obvious, which means it must not have been created by God. You cannot patent Prunus africana even if you discover it cures COVID. But you can patent any extracts, whether you extract with water or any solvent. That becomes your invention. So the invention, which is patentable, must be non-obvious and new. So for it to be new, it behoves us to be quiet until you patent. You know, Kenyans are very good in disclosing information which is in the roll mill to press before before it is in the file, they have already said, I have invented a cure for AIDS. So the thing is, you can patent a natural material through modification. For example, you can boil a mixture from Brunus africana and from Dombea. That is not that particular mixture is not a product from God. So it is a new invention which is patentable. But for you to patent, you must have been quiet until it is on file. And it must be novel. Novel means it works for the purpose for which you said it is designed to do. And patents, once filed, run for 20 years, and it is very profitable business. You can make money in 3 ways from a patent. One, you can sell to investors who have the capacity to commercialize if you don't have the capacity to roll it out en masse. Number 2, you can produce it en masse as the inventor, or you can dangle the patents online for thieves to steal it, and you sue the thieves to pay you damages. One of the reasons why you patent is also to dangle it to thieves who believe in plagiarism. So when they produce a product and it is discovered that they stole it, the patent office has an obligation to protect you by asking for compensation from your invention. So what we need to do in this particular conversation is we need to help our Kenyans who are innovative to secure their inventions. And the way to do it is patent at Kenya Intellectual Property Office. Even if it is at rudimentary stage, it can be developed over time. If you have an idea which is working basically, you can patent it in advance so that you secure it from thieves in advance. What I have heard from this great panel is that the different communities have different innovations, which I can say the missing gap is how do we protect it? We've lost a lot of our products to international fraudsters by failing to patent in good time. Look at Siondo. It is a Kenyan invention, but the Japanese have stolen it and they are making a lot of money. They are earning a lot of royalty out of a Kenyan invention, which we lost by failing to patent. And the main reason why it was lost is because we kept opening our doors to foreigners who come and look at the things we have, and they have the skills to patent in advance. The other very serious problem is we are losing genetic material. In fact, Americans are patenting our genetic materials. They come here, they get a tree which is very strongly medicinal, they take it to America and they patent it as an American genetic material. And this is where Kenyans have to learn to keep quiet. And I emphasize, we should not be trigger happy going to press to say, I have something that is changing lives and you have not patented it. So the advice I can give to this panel is, let's have another session now where we can zero in on patenting and we identify the people who have some patentable materials and we help them to secure these particular materials. Talking generally is a good thing because we are getting to share knowledge and to get to know that we have a lot of capacity in this country. And Kenya is a great country. I mean, we shouldn't be importing herbal medicines from China. Most of these materials we import from China are one tree, some herb, some spider, some snail, and we believe in them more than we believe in ourselves. So the clarion call is, let's believe in what is Kenyan, let's believe in ourselves. We can make it, and we can be better than anybody in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. One question that has come up that I think is very crucial from what you've talked about is it possible for an individual to patent community in indigenous knowledge? Or
community?
Yes, that's a question.
What is documented by a community is not patentable. You cannot patent folk song. You cannot patent something which is collectively owned by a community. It has to be individual invention, which is only known to you, and it is novel. It is something that can transform lives to some degree.
Mm-hmm. So from your point of view, that you feel that patenting something that is novel will be, yes, you just 1 second, patenting something that is novel will be able to make sure that it moves from generation to generation because it will be already being used and utilized.
If you say your grandfather knows it, it cannot be patented. If you say your wife knows it and your husband knows it, you can. But you can use your intellect to modify. For example, if it is known that this tree treats a particular disease, you cannot patent that tree as it were, because it is a creation of God.
Yes.
But if you extract, the active ingredients through some way, say boiling with ethanol, for example,
yes. Mm-hmm.
That is not something which came with God. It is your creativity. So which can allow you now to patent that tree using the extra input that you are putting in.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Moderator.
Yes, Mr. Kimaren, go ahead.
I would like, moderator.
Okay, Dr. Taracha, then Mr. Kimaren.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for laying out very explicitly how innovations generally can be protected. It really is very, very useful. But moderator, I would like to focus and just make some comments on the very subject of how we protect and secure our indigenous knowledge assets before any value is added on it, because that really is a critical point. So before you do any extraction, you add any value and all that, how can we really protect our indigenous knowledge assets? And that takes me back to to the TK Act, the Traditional Knowledge Act that I mentioned earlier on, moderator. And I would like to cite the example of India. India is a world leader. In fact, India on this planet leads everyone else in terms of the massive programs, the massive investment they put into documenting indigenous knowledge from their different communities. Here, we are under 50 communities. India is about 500. But they started a program where it aggressively, deliberately, consciously identified and documented indigenous knowledge, and importantly, secured it in what they call the TKD, which is Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. And what is important about that is that India made it known to the whole world that they have documented the indigenous knowledge in the various fields and all that, but it is password protected. And they said, may anyone who may find use for this indigenous knowledge approach us, but on certain terms, And if you access that knowledge without engaging formally with the Indian authorities, they take you to court. And there are cases that where they have done that. So the TK Act here in Kenya, moderator, is pointing in that direction, that county governments can be empowered to do the actual documentation and store the various knowledge, IK assets. The knowledge and the assets that are associated is documented and stored in the IK registers, IK digital registers, and a copy of which is deposited with the National Digital. At that level, anybody who may wish to access that knowledge and put it to use can only do it under structured partnership with the community, with the county government, and with the national government, and other players within our borders. That is what the TK Act seeks to achieve. So
if I may chip in,
yes, Your Excellency.
You've made a very strong point there. You know, what we need to do is any Kenyan tree, we protect it as a Kenyan tree, and you say anybody utilizing it might seek permission from the Kenyan government.
Yes.
But if we allow, for example, an American to take Dombea Barghezi to US and they patent that genetic material as an American material, we lose it.
Yeah,
so that is why we need very strong cases to make sure that no one steals any of our genetic materials out of the country.
Exactly, Your Excellency.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that example that you have alluded to, Your Excellency, is that something that has already happened with that tree?
Yes. During the course of patenting my invention in the US, apparently one of the trees, and it's a Kenyan tree, there is an American company which wanted to steal one of the Kenyan species, but through Tanzania, because they saw that it was very efficacious, and we sued them.
Oh, okay. Successfully, I hope.
Successfully. So you know what they can do is, if you have a very nice tree which can be of medicinal value here, they can take the genetic material from Tanzania, and that is why we need regional protection generally.
Yeah, exactly.
Bonakimaren talked about the problem is trying to privatize something that community can benefit from. Instead of, like, not the tree, that particular tree, for instance, when someone takes it and tries to privatize it as their own private property, how is that even ethical?
Can I expand on that?
Yes,
before His Excellency the Professor responds. I want to appreciate His Excellency for clearly articulating the pathways to individual patency of property rights, intellectual property rights. And also Dr. Tarasha for trying to contextualize the legal opportunities available for us. But I think we need to remember that this question of how to protect and prevent exploitation of indigenous knowledge is not a Kenyan problem. It's a global problem. And all indigenous communities and knowledge holders globally are grappling with this question. In fact, there is an international platform called the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IP-based, that I think came out of the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity discussion, that is actually grappling, how do you patent collective property rights? Because the challenge with the current individual-oriented intellectual property rights is that it dissolves communities, and some knowledges are collectively held. And therefore, how fair are we going to be if we subject ourselves to an individual rights-based system when our rights and knowledges are collective? Second is that there are many things that, for example, the Maasai would be interested in protecting. So you have methods of preservation of meat that are valid and they are being used until now. The mocking of Sureni, others or preserving meat in meat, and all these things that serve the community, that there are know-how and innovations that have served them for eons. And already, Prof, they have already taken Oleleshua Oleleshwa, I think it's a scientific name, Dr. Tarasha can correct me, Taconanthus camphoratus, has the warriors of the Maasai have used for years as soap. They put it and armpit as a deodorant, and it has oils. So somebody has extracted it and is selling it, calling it maleficence. And actually it still has oleleshwa on it, and it's in the market. Where did he get? He came and interviewed the Maasai and went and privatized. How do we protect this? There are examples in South Africa where the rooibos plant by the sun in South Africa, they have managed to protect this, to get royalties on this. And this community gets about almost $1 million every year from the revenues generated from the rooibos plant. So just to say, biopiracy is a real problem, and the mechanism of protecting collective rights is an ongoing debate, which as a country, we need to debate and pull lessons like those from India, those from South Africa. And my last comment here is that I think for me, the greatest space for documenting, protecting, and living indigenous knowledge is a county level. In the context of devolution, the national space is an abstract space. Everything must land in a county. A national intervention must land in a county, let alone county intervention. So the energy must be placed on county government, create capacity to understand and allocate resources to document and apply indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing that we do have a representative from the Kenya Copyright Board here, Mr. George Nyakweba, and he's letting us know that the National Digital Registry is maintained at the Kenya Copyright Board, Section 5A of the TK and TCE Act. So rights, yes, need to be maintained, and the Kenya Copyright Board is here to ensure that that is done. Thank you very much.
Moderator.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
There is a critical question you have actually been calling our attention to,
yes,
maybe raised by a member from the public. And that's individual rights versus community rights in terms of how the benefits accruing from the utilization of the indigenous knowledge held by that community and any material that has been used by that community can be shared. I would like to say the following, moderator, because it's a very critical question, and I want to appreciate also the views of my fellow panelists on that subject. But generally, in any community, moderator, there will be knowledge that is generally known to be communally, recognized and used. But then within that community also, there are individuals who are known to be either the key custodians, not really custodians is not the right word, but the people who have been practicing that. They will say, oh, if there is a problem with mounts, or if there is a problem with that, go to so-and-so. They may be able to help you, okay? That sort of thing. But now, I would like again to refer to the TK Act, our own legislation, which is now under implementation. We haven't gone very far with it. And then I would like to use an example. This is a practical example. It's a practical example. It's something that has happened. And I think it will be of interest to His Excellency, the Honorable Governor, and my fellow panelists and the public who are tuning in. Moderator, sometime at the beginning of December last year, an event happened in Kakamega County, which is very relevant to what we are discussing. Now, this event is actually in the context of the current pandemic, COVID-19, and how the country is trying to grapple, looking for solutions from everywhere it can find solutions. Of course, the obvious thing is that we are getting support and assistance from outside. But then internally, a number of us came together, moderator, and started asking. And I'm I'm actually honestly impressed by His Excellency, the Governor's revelation that part of his work, he has what one would call a herbal immune booster. In fact, that's very critical. The program we have right now, that National Museums of Kenya is leading together with KEMRI and other key players, including the county governments, is to try and ask the following question, which is, and this goes back to what my colleague, Dr. Esther Mato said, very critical. She said, if pneumonia, if respiratory infections have been with us for a very long time, surely there must be something, and we were not necessarily depending on medicine from London or anywhere, particularly at the community level. Surely there must be something our communities have been using to ward off this pneumonia or respiratory infections. That is the very basis upon which, moderator, we went out and started to engage in a structured way, communities and traditional health practitioners from the coast, central Kenya, Nyanza, and Western. Of course, we'll be moving into other regions of Kenya as well. But when we engaged them, we were asking that very question. We are in a pandemic of COVID-19. Is there anything within your communities that you used to manage respiratory infections? And the answer to that, moderator, was just amazing. People would come forth and say what they have, what they have been using. And it's based on that we went ahead and said, we're going to access some of those herbal formulations and then subject them to scientific validation. As we speak right now, that process has gone on. But now to go to the Kakamega event. Kakamega event, we were able to enter into what we're calling a formal partnership through PIC, prior informed consent. Now, this is born out of an international instrument called the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol lays out mechanisms of how benefits can be shared between indigenous knowledge holders, people who have certain herbal medicines, the scientists who come on board and partner with them and add value along the lines that His Excellency, the Governor, was articulating. Now, we came up and engaged communities and signed formally signed the prior informed consent, which has, on one hand, providers of the material, and on the other hand, users of the material. And within that document, it's clearly laid out what percentage of benefits will go to the person who has the knowledge within the community, or the community itself, the county government, and the researchers. It's all laid out in that. So we are proud that through this program, Kenya is pursuing and implementing an international protocol, the Nagoya Protocol, through the TK Act and through this pandemic. So I'm happy to say that we are starting to put mechanisms in place.
Mwanike.
Yes, I can hear that. Karibu Bwana Basosio. Thank you very much. By the way, the fact that there is something happening, please get us those medicines quickly so that we can we can fight all this pneumonia that is going around with COVID and everything. Karibu Bwana Basosio.
Thank you. I like the story of the Olelesha Taconanthus camphoretus. You know, when I was young, my mother used to go to the Elgeyo escarpment and picks Taconanthus camphoretus. It takes a blanket and boils the Taconanthus camphoretus and puts us inside that blanket and the steam. And she says that yes, and it is indigenous knowledge, and the allergies could go away. So when Dr. Esther talks of we could cure pneumonia and the rest, we really need to be serious. And I've been looking there are a lot of indigenous knowledge and indigenous issues within our communities. For example, here in Elgeyo Marakwet, the traditional head surgeons in Elgeyo Marakwet, that these old Wase can open somebody's brain, do a surgery. They have never gone to school. And these are some of the issues that we need to be proud of as a county and as a country. Secondly is on the issues of hydrological, and this is a funny one, Mwaniki, that a month ago, I wanted to get a water source, a permanent water source for myself in my place. And I didn't want to engage an hydrogeological survey. And I said, there are some old wasses within my neighborhood. And they came with a fruit tree that they have broken of this size of a pen. And how they hold it this way. And they move around the farm where you want to do that borehole. The more it vibrates, the more chances of you striking that water. And when they told me that you drill this place, and then weeks later, I now call the real hydrological survey. You know what? The same place that these old men are pointed is the same place that the surveyor, the hydrological surveyor, told me to drill. Only two issues they differed on. One was the hydrological survey was saying that you drill to 165 meters. And this other one was telling me you will not go beyond 40 meters. And he told me, the indigenous knowledge ones, told me that at around 5, 6, 7, 8 meters, you'll have rocks. And for sure, when the machine came from 6 meters all the way to 32 meters, where we struck the water, 20 cubic meters of water, it was purely a rock. So they took it at the end of the day, and the surveyor was telling us 165 meters. Again, in this same place, we have somebody who you can tell on such a date in 1988, which day was it? And he will tell you that it was on Wednesday. You tell him 13th March 1989 was on which day? I know it. That was my birthday. That was the day I was born. So it is on a Sunday. And he will tell you it's on a Sunday without referring to anything. Aloe vera. All of us, know aloe vera.
Yes, aloe vera, yes.
And for those ones who are rearing chicken, always we buy SP 30. But traditionally, they use aloe vera and they extract its juice, mix it with water, and it cures chicken very well. It cures chicken very well. These are some of the issues that we've seen working. So when His Excellency, the governor, talks of patenting, and then it is more of individualized, then as Kimaren brings brings that issue up, then for sure we need to see how we can even be able to assist our communities. And somebody in our chat, Moderator Mwaniki, is talking of when somebody dies with that knowledge goes. What is this that we can be able to do? For sure, I agree that majority of these issues are within the counties. But if you look at the capacity of the counties, it's very minimal. That functionalities, really, resources don't follow some of these functionalities. And that is where we are having a key challenge in terms of doing all this that we can be able to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you're right. I'm seeing very good questions coming out on the chat line.
Mwaniki, if you can allow me to respond to the last speaker.
Yes, go ahead.
When I was talking about patenting, I did not restrict it to individuals. You can have many inventors. You can have the co-inventor and the rest are, you can have the principal inventor and others can be the co-inventors. So the list can be as long as it can be.
Okay, that's a good clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. I can see Dr. Esther wants to say something. Yes, Dr. Esther.
Can I make a comment?
Please make a comment, but I would like all
yes,
panelists to think about this.
I'll be very brief.
Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
Notice that the gender balance here is very, very.
You must talk a lot, yes. You have
Yes,
to talk
but,
for
but I
three people.
wanted, yes, allow me just to make a very brief comments. I think listening to the panelists, it's very evident that we have lost our resources, our IK-based resources. And I think it's a high time that we asked ourselves, what is it that we have lost? How much have we lost? And what are we going to do about it? We all know that, if you don't use something, you're going to lose it. We know the benefits of Leleshwa. What are we doing about it as a country? So, and the information is out there. I mean, there have been publications as way back as 1970. So someone does not even need to come to Kenya to get Leleshwa. They can access it from many other places, and not limited to Kenya. So I think it's a question of us not having done our bit. Then number two, I think looking at this whole, the whole value chain, I think we need to have a win-win scenario if we are going to move forward. What am I saying this? If you look at what my colleague, Dr. Talasha is talking about, and I'm happy that we've been working together, and actually even Kemri has been at the forefront. We actually, at this point in time, we are doing some work in the lab trying to see whether we can come up with immunomodulators for COVID-19. However, we know that research takes a very, very long time. Actually, for drug development, it takes a whole 25 years. The question is, those who hold the IK now, are we telling them that they are only going to get their benefits in 25 years' time? That is not actually encouraging at all. So I think from where I sit, we need to be very, very deliberate. What is it that we can do in the short term? The herbal remedies are already out there. They are being used. They have been used for millennia, So the question is, what is it that we can do in the short term to ensure that they are scaled up? And from where we sit as scientists, all we need to do is to ensure that the issue of toxicity, or because we know what cures can also kill, we address the issues of toxicity. They're already using it. Then the issue of dosage, and this can be done because you only need to see what they are giving, and there are scientific methods to do that. And that in a very short time, we are talking about 2-3 years, we have something that can be put out there. If you look at traditional Chinese medicine, what they give out there is not a tablet as it were, it's herbal remedy. So I don't think we need to wait for 25 years. We don't need to tell the IK holders to wait for 25 years. Let us work with them. And from the word go, they need to see what is there for them. And we must not tell them that this can only happen in 25 years time, because if you do that, then somebody will come up till the knowledge and go away with it. Then I think we also need to streamline our activities. Right now, you notice the National Museums of Kenya is engaged in some activities. Our research institutions, Cambridge, our universities, and we don't talk to each other. We all work in silos. So what does that mean? There's a lot of wastage of resources. There's a lot of duplication of efforts. But I think we need to have a forum at national level and at county level. And I think the counties have a golden opportunity now to ensure that they have forums at the county level where anybody who is doing any research or any activities on indigenous knowledge can be talking from one point and ensure that whatever it is they are doing, they are addressing the needs of that county. Yeah, well, that's what I would want to comment on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Esther. That's Dr. Esther. That is very enlightening, especially on the fact that people have to wait 25 years, you said, before they can benefit from their IK patent. That's far too long. We need to use that immediately. I can see a lot of comments here. I'm trying to sift through them. Thank you for your comments, all of you that have joined in. I can see Mariama Farah is saying that natural justice, we at Natural Justice would be happy to help communities to develop their biocultural community protocols. Thank you very much for giving us that information and continue talking to us. I had a question, actually. Dr. Wanjala and Oscar Simanto have both said, and I think this is a challenge to all of us, or a question to all of us, is indigenous knowledge shrinking as people die? And someone talked about that. When they die and they go, is it shrinking, or are we moving now to more modern things and forgetting that there is indigenous knowledge? That would be a question that I would like to have answered. Another question that I would, and I think I'll give that one to Dr. Taracha. I think that one is very good for you. The other question I'd like to raise up is, I think we talked about community knowledge and individual knowledge patenting, that has already been talked about. I have another one here that says, besides inculcating indigenous knowledge in the curriculum from early stages, how else can young people use this as an opportunity to create employment for themselves and give young people the opportunity for knowledge, for this knowledge, and using it to move it forward. I would like to ask Esther, Dr. Esther, that one I think is for you. You're very passionate about about knowledge. Let me also go up one more question. I think I had seen earlier. Would I like to raise? Yes, is another one. Okay.
Moderator.
Yes, sir.
So who goes first? Myself or Dr. Matu?
You go first, and then I will ask Dr. Martin, because she has just talked. Let's have a bit of a break from her. Let her take a sip of water.
Thank you, moderator, and my fellow panelists, and thank you for the question from the public. Yeah, is indigenous knowledge shrinking? That's the question. Are we losing it as the knowledge holders die and or what? So this is how I would respond to that, moderator. Yes and no. Okay, the answer to that question is yes and no. Now it's yes because clearly in certain communities you'll find that there is this external force called urbanization or globalization or whatever you want to call it. Okay, anything but our old lifestyles. Okay, it's clearly impacting negatively on our indigenous knowledge, its appreciation of it, and how we are securing it. So there is that threat. And then you will find that those communities that are suffering the most from those external forces, you may find that there are only very few people who hold their original indigenous knowledge in its wholesome and pure form, and so there is a danger there that we could lose it. Okay, but no, because if you look at other communities within Kenya and all that, and I'm happy, and when I look at my brother Kimaren, is really a living example of a community in Kenya, the Ma community, that holds dear what they have practiced for a very long time. Okay, but it's also, it could be a matter of time. They can also be overrun by these external forces. So but beyond asking the question, is IK dwindling? The equally important question is, how do we stop the dwindling? Okay, and I will not tire in reminding my fellow panelists and the public that that's why the national government came up with the TK Act. That's the very reason. And that's the very reason why it devolved culture to the counties. And that's the very reason why the national government is very deliberate about empowering the counties through capacity building and training to ensure that it gets documented. We identify those indigenous knowledge associated assets, okay, within the county boundaries, and secure it.
And Asante Sana, actually the same question had been asked by Madam Modesta Lynn on I think, is it on Facebook or on Twitter? I think it was on Twitter. Yes. So I would also like to ask Esther. There's a question for you. Please answer that one, and then I have a question for His Excellency the Governor and Honorable Basosio. I have questions for you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, for that question. I think from where I sit, besides the traditional way of capacity building, I think the county governments, because now they are closer to the people, we have taken power closer to the people. I think they could borrow like the idea of the indigenous technologies fair. Like I gave an example of Laikipia County government that's already doing that. Sorry. And I also want to believe that other counties could be doing it. It's only that it has not been brought into the limelight. And I want to say that there are opportunities there for entrepreneurship. if you look at the area of indigenous vegetables, I think 10 years ago, it was almost impossible for anybody to get indigenous vegetables in the supermarkets. But right now, if you want any indigenous vegetables, the managus, the tereles, they are right there. And it is simply because indigenous knowledge just better met with modern technology. And now we have them. So I think there are opportunities there. But besides bioresources, I think there are also other opportunities, like for example, in music. I think we have not commercialized our music that is based on IK. And there are opportunities there. If people are coming from other parts of the world to come and see our indigenous people dance, so why can't we market that? And why can't it be taken up by, by the young people who can incorporate it with this, with the technology that we have right now and earn some money from there? And besides that, there are also other cultural aspects, drama, and so on and so forth. So there are opportunities, but I think we need to go outside the normal way of capacity building in schools and so on and so forth. We need to identify other opportunities. The civil society, I think this is an area that they can take advantage of, when it comes to creating opportunities for employment. Because if you look at graduates who graduate in areas of IK, most of them cannot find jobs, but I think they need to be more creative and see how they can make money out of this. And I think with the support of the county governments which are closer to the people, this is possible. I hope I've partly made an effort to answer that question.
You have done very well. You've done exceedingly well. Anybody else wants to add on to that particular one? Anything?
Yeah. Can I come in?
10, yes.
Yeah, and thank you very much for the panelists. I think they have answered the questions very well. I just want to compliment by saying that you find that in terms of storage of this knowledge, is it possible to cascade the model of the national museums even at the county level? Where at the county level, you'll have like a museum that will document the traditions of the people in that county. In a building, those artifacts that we are losing very fast. How do you make sure that there's a place, even the small children in that county can go and see all these artifacts? They are told the importance of those artifacts, or even these tree species and all this traditional knowledge, so that even as we reach the national museums that is in Upper Hill, the local people, the local children, school-going children can also access these services at the local level instead of traveling all the way to Kenya museums. I think it's one way to store that knowledge and make sure that it's propagated internally. Thank you.
Banaleren, I have a further question on that. Is there a place, is there a forum, is there a getting together of all the people with the indigenous knowledge that is and it's shared? Does the government bring people together?
I think my colleague from the National Museums can answer that better than me. But I think a forum like that is very important. I don't know if it's in the IK, the TK Act. I'm sorry, I've not gone through it. But definitely we need more forums that will create an opportunity for interactions and learning through them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will give you a chance, Daktari, to, in your closing remarks, to be able to answer that question. But I have a question for Honorable Basosio. Do counties need to have individual laws that are specific to their own county regarding IK and the needs that the people in their counties, the different communities in the counties have? And for the question that I had for His Excellency the Governor is, in terms of medicine, are we going to face international problems in terms of IP, which is intellectual property and other rights? Will we face legal challenges when we're talking about modern knowledge vis-a-vis indigenous knowledge? Because people might say, this we already have done already, this kind of tablet. It's a tablet that uses the knowledge that you're saying is yours, but we already have that tablet. And then also the other question I would ask in line with medicine is, have we considered inculcating and having traditional medicine in the mainstream healthcare system? That is a question that we're getting from different people. Thank you. I'll start with Honorable Basosio.
Thank you so much, Mwaniki. In terms of counties having their own specific laws, one thing is that we need to bring into context is, yes, as much as we have the national laws, then as counties look into having their own laws and policies, these laws and policies should not go against the national laws and policies. So what can be done is just to cascade the national laws and policies. For example, a county like county in this western part of Kenya, we cannot be talking of a law on indigenous knowledge on how to conserve mangroves, but we can talk of laws that we can be able to conserve what is within that county. For example, if you come to a county like Elgeyo Marakwet, Trans Nzoia, Uasin Gishu, and West Pokot, where we have Senkwer communities as indigenous people, then we can have laws that will take care of some of their issues as indigenous communities within this region. And remember that as you develop these policies and laws, then you need to bring into the context what other communities within these counties have. But we need to be very careful so that the laws that are being developed by counties doesn't go against the national laws, because this is one country, Kenya, and all these other county governments are just part of this country, and the laws should not go against what is in the country. But we can, as we look into them, then we can be able to critically look at what we have as indigenous knowledge within a specific county and give it what it deserves.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes. So that question and the question for the governors, they've been tabled by a gentleman by the name of Jared Nyaguti. Thank you, Jared. Go ahead, Your Excellency.
Please remind me the second question as I answer number one.
Yes, the second question is: are we thinking of inculcating traditional medicine in mainstream healthcare, Kenya-wise, in our healthcare system in Kenya?
Yes, let me begin with that one. I am a very strong supporter of inculcation of traditional medicine to our healthcare system. For example, I studied in University of Traditional Chinese Medicine in Tianjin. And when you go to a Chinese hospital, and there are two particular pharmacies, the traditional Chinese medicine pharmacy and the Western type pharmacy. So when you are sick, you go and you are given a chance to choose which one you want to go home with. And in fact, most of the people choose traditional Chinese medicine for ailments that are not that serious. For antibiotics, of course, the Western medicines are better. So if a disease is not so life-threatening, so many people choose the traditional medicine. So we could choose the Chinese model as well in Kenya. In fact, the Chinese are earning a lot of money out of traditional Chinese medicine, more than tea and coffee and even tourism combined. Most of the tianzis we are taking are very simple medicines from China. So if we went that route, Kenyans would really be very, very, very rich. And then it is also a very easy way of conserving forests. You tell somebody, if you have two kilos of this tree, you are given, you supply to Kemri, they produce herbal medicines, and you have a living. We will not be forcing people to grow trees. Our forests will naturally take off. The other issue is you will never be sued for producing a particular herbal medicine whose composition is different from what is existing. It is only if you plagiarize. But if you use trees that are from a different region, for example, the Kenyan trees are different from Chinese trees, there is no problem. And the only thing is, if you don't infringe on somebody's patent. And furthermore, patents only have a lifetime of 20 years. and you can, and they are generally available for production by anybody. So those are the very basic rules of herbal medicines. Beyond 20 years, the patent is expired unless you extend the patent through some tricks. Otherwise, your royalty period is ending at 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I would just would like to add something there to His Excellency's
Dr.
remarks. On the very issue of steps being taken by our government or our country to incorporate herbal medicines into the mainstream health care. Yes, at the legal framework level, the Health Act, there is a whole chapter on alternative and complementary medicines in the Health Act. And for some of us who have, just like His Excellency, Professor Chipkwony, some of us have been very, very enthusiastic and keen and desirous of the fact that herbal medicines need to be given space. And we were very happy when His Excellency, the President, assented to the amendment to the Health Act that incorporated a whole chapter on alternative and complementary medicines. I think that's a big step. We need to build on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, building on that, I think, is important. Yes, Dr. Esther.
Yeah, thank you. Because traditional medicine research is our home at Cambridge. Maybe I could add to what my colleague has said, Dr. Talasha and His Excellency. I think we need to move further from that because the Health Act has provided for the development of traditional medicine and traditional and alternative medicine in this country. But I think we need to move further and make it functional. As it were, the Act recommended the establishment of Traditional Medicine Authority that would oversee the whole sector, but that is yet to happen many years later. So I think it's a high time that we as stakeholders make sure that at least we move from what is documented to an action, because for so long as the traditional health practitioners are practicing out there on their own, it is very sure that we are also losing indigenous knowledge. So I think we need to give legs to this Health Act and make sure that what is recommended there is actually actualized, because I think that has been a major missing link. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for the last 1 year, we have had so many traditional healers coming to Kemley with claims that they have remedies that can be used for COVID-19.
Right.
But we cannot, there's very little that we can do. We can only do very basic research, but that does not mean that they'll be able to provide their herbal remedies to the public, because that authority is still not in place. So I'm hoping that the Council of Governors can take it up, because the practitioners are within their areas, and make sure that the Health Act and that particular clause on traditional medicine is actually actualized. Thank you.
Esther, let me follow that a little further. You're saying if someone comes to you and says they have a remedy or a malady for COVID, they can be able to sell it to the people around themselves or to the public? They cannot.
No, they cannot. The reason why they come to us is because they need to provide scientific evidence that it can actually treat COVID-19. But remember, our mandate is research. So we can take the remedies and do some research, and very basic, because of course, like I said, research is a very long process, you know. We can do some research and provide some evidence that it could have some benefits. But that does not mean that that traditional doctor now can take his drug to the pharmacy and so on and so forth. The other processes are required, and that is the support that they are not getting, because as it were, I mean, traditional medicine is yet to be, recognized just as the modern medicine is in this country.
So probably we do have remedies and maladies, but that we are not utilizing because they're not. The process takes too long.
Certainly,
okay.
To a very large extent.
Yeah, and what my colleague says is perfectly true. But I would like to go back to what His Excellency, the Honorable Governor, mentioned earlier on, sharing with us the Chinese experience. I actually, that's the way to go. And the point that Dr. Mato has been making over and over, which is valid, that for certain stratum of research, it can be long and protracted. In fact, the 20, 25-year period is not uncommon. But that's if you're pursuing, like Professor Jepkonye said, if you're pursuing things to refinement, you look for active molecules in a plant and then check their activity and all that goes with it. It is a long term. But the Chinese experience is you have to have a plant material and make it stay as natural as possible. All you need to find to determine, as my colleague is saying, is dosage, safety, okay? And that it's still doing that which the traditional health practitioner claimed it does. So it does not have to be in its purest form, like medicine coming from London or from, it can still work, okay, if we can determine dosage, safety, and that is effective. And then it's formulated and packaged in as natural form as possible. That's the missing link.
That is a missing link.
So Nagoya, can I add something?
Yes, I would like to hear that. Yes, let me hear Bandakimaran, what do you think about that? And we shall be winding up now because
I will try to add my voice to that as I will come back again. Now, one is that you see the challenge we have as articulated by Dr. Matu is this idea of indigenous knowledge, show me the scientific evidence. And when you look at the history of medicine, of course, indigenous communities have always discovered these things and they show, and then the scientists extract the active ingredient and beautify it into a tablet and patent it, you know? And so the politics of managing the interaction of this knowledge system is critical. The second comment I want to make about whether this knowledge is becoming obsolete, you see, communities have no choice. Indigenous knowledge is the essence of their daily livelihoods. They don't practice it as a luxury. They practice it because it is what helps them continue surviving. So when pastoralists move from point A to B in mobility, and they're accused of a craze of moving, they have discovered over time this is an adaptation to these semi-arid lands. Rainfall, and by extension, pasture is scarce in space and time. So you creatively extend access to these resources by moving as other places recover. And that's how they have managed to make use of the arid lands for centuries. But a policy of fragmentation, sit down, privatize land ownership. You cannot privatize clouds. You can privatize land, but you cannot allocate a cloud for every land that you give to an individual. And so this is experience-informed adaptation that is critical for climate change. The third comment for me is the idea, one way of addressing this challenge of sidelining indigenous knowledge, we know we have been indoctrinated with modernity and civilization and globalization until when we see an indigenous person living in this, because this knowledge is embedded in culture. Tunawaita washamba. And in fact, the ushamba guy is negative, but jamaa wa mtaa is positive. So we need to address this stigma of indigenous knowledge being the past we have left that we are not interested in, and class knowledge being the place to be. The third comment is, in terms of practical suggestion, is that we need to establish knowledge practice hubs. You know, indigenous knowledge is landscape specific, ecosystem specific, culturally embedded. So pastoralists have a lot to share. Forest people have a lot to share. Wetlands and coastal lands have a lot to share. Can we establish centers of indigenous knowledge excellence where these practices and knowledge can be shared and documented? And then can we, for example, can the Council of Governors, through our distinguished professor, His Excellency, the governor here, have an annual conference on indigenous knowledge? You know, in the coming conference, we only have a session like this one of barely 2 hours. to talk about a body of knowledge generated over years and neglected for years. So I think it would be useful to think about an Indigenous Knowledge Annual Conference to take stock of how knowledge is generated, how are we practicing. Fourth is, I hear in terms of resources, which is a big issue. The issue now is no longer recognition, but what does it mean to recognize in law? What does it mean in practice? Where are the resources? I have learned over time that government cannot fund what it has not coded. You cannot request money through an IFMIS system if there is no code for that thing. So if we don't codify and provide a code for financing Indigenous knowledge, it will always be peripheral. It will always be receiving resources that are leftovers from coded budget lines. So I want to request His Excellency to lead us from the front here in actually pushing for a codification of a budget line to enliven and support Indigenous knowledge system. Last but not least is that we need county champions, not just, so we need champions at two levels. Governments, county governments, as presented here, that lead from the front in supporting documentation, application, and giving preeminence or prominence, rather, Indigenous knowledge. But we need also focal points dedicated to Indigenous knowledge at the executive county level, so that we have an institutional framework to deliver Indigenous knowledge. Already we have seen the SDG champions. You have people dedicated to talk about SDGs. And so I should stop there and say thank you so much for this very great interaction. And I hope we have whetted the appetite for those who are listening to pick up this debate and run with it. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for making your closing remarks before I asked you to make your closing remarks. You're quite before going ahead of me. I'd like to ask Bwana Lerenten, would you like to make your close? In fact, what I'd like us to do now is start winding down. Everyone gives their closing remarks. Maybe we'll have a sort of way forward from His Excellency the Governor, who will speak last. But I would like to go in the order of Bwana Lerenten, then Madam Esther, then Bwana Barsosio, and then finally, of course, our chief guest, His Excellency the Governor. So in that order, please, if you'd like to do. Yes, and you each have 1 minute, 15 seconds.
You didn't mention Taracha.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mention. Yeah. But Taracha, you're right before Mr. Basosio. Right before Honorable Basosio. So we do it in that order. Lerenten, Esther. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Moderator, and the Chair, His Excellency, the Governor of Okerisho, distinguished panelists. I really appreciate this very, very knowledgeable exchange and a very informative session. As we close, this topic does not just become a discussion, and we continue discussing it. How do we pick the points from here and actualize them through a very deliberate action plan going forward? And of course, the role of the county governments has come out very clearly. And we need to see them picking up these points and see how they can implement some of these points on the grassroots. Also, I'm seeing the importance of the interlinkages between research and the Indigenous knowledge. We need to make sure that there's a strong synergy, and we can apply more research to the Indigenous knowledge to make sure that they can be useful, and of course, change that knowledge into resources that we can benefit from. Also, the issue of awareness. Yeah, I heard today that there's a TK Act. Yeah, how many people are aware of that? And you need to create awareness about it, how we can actualize the content of that act, because it's very important. Of course, I appreciate the capacity building the 22 counties, but we should not take it even further to make sure that that act, very important, is going to be actualized. Also, I just want to bring the issue of maladaptation, even as we plan programs and projects. let's make sure that we tap into the traditional knowledge. I've seen some projects that ignore the traditional knowledge of the community and eventually they fail. Like citing a project, a water point. Community will say, no, we don't want a water point here, we need it here, somewhere else. Ignore that knowledge and then it becomes, it doesn't benefit them eventually, it becomes a source of conflict. So we should make sure that we also get in touch with the local people, with the local knowledge, as we design our projects and programs, especially on issues of climate change. Also,
you only have 10 seconds left, sir.
The last one is issue of patent. I know it's a complicated process. Yeah, we need awareness, we need capacity building on how we can patent this knowledge to make sure that we don't continuously lose this to outsiders. Let me stop there and say thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Laurentine. Madam Esther, Dr. Esther.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to have really a very vibrant discussion. I think for me, from where I sit, I would really want to recommend that we have a very clear roadmap on how we are going to exploit the opportunities that are presented by IK. And from where I sit, I think we need to move from just protection and preservation of IK. As we talk about accessing benefits, we need to be very, very deliberate and identify what are those benefits and how can we take advantage of them to ensure that they benefit the people. Number two, I think looking at our experiences in the past, the IK holders have been, we normally engage them at a point where we have already identified what it is that we want to do. I think from it is very, very clear that if we are going to have a win-win situation, we need to engage them even from a very early stage. For example, if it is research, even before we are coming to implement the research, can we engage them even as we develop the proposals and so on and so forth, so that whatever interventions that we come up with, there'll be a buy-in. Then lastly, I think as a country, and I'm talking about both the national and the county governments, I think they need to be very, very deliberate in implementing the existing policy and legal frameworks at both local, regional, and international levels. Because if they only exist on paper and they are not benefiting the local people and the holders of IK, then I think their existence is in futility. So thank you very much, and I hope that we can be able to take it up from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, we talked about making things actually happen, not just too much talk.
Yes.
Ruben Tumba says we're talking too much. We need to have practical things that give us food security and household health as well.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much. Next, I think is Bwana Dr. Taracha.
Yes, thank you, moderator. In terms of my closing remarks, allow me first of all to recognize the good thought and consideration by the Council of Governors to put the whole subject of indigenous knowledge into this discourse. I think it's very commendable. Now, in terms of specifics, I would like to recognize and highlight the following. One is that let us all collectively, and when I say all, I mean the various different players, national government, county government, the general public, civil society, everyone, the local communities, above all, the most important. Let us recognize that the national government has put into place a legal framework, the Protection of Traditional Knowledge and Cultural Expressions Act. It is the one that really provides that framework, the roadmap that we all need to chart in order, first of all, protect and secure our indigenous knowledge, 2, promote it, and 3, utilize it. Utilize it is very, very important. So how are we doing that from the National Museum's perspective? Working again with many other players, we are executing a national government duty, which is provide capacity through training, government personnel and communities and other players within those counties on the very skills that are required, competences that are required to document and conserve indigenous knowledge. But beyond that, and let's recognize this, moderator and my fellow panelists and the public. And once we document and secure, we have to move to the next big step of utilization. And that's how this initiative of natural products industry came into being, and many other initiatives. I would like to emphasize one thing as I close up. Through the training, we're emphasizing two things. One, that as counties, after empowerment, through training and all that, embark on identifying and documenting indigenous knowledge associated assets, and there are very many. Those are the ones that will then be deposited in the IK registers of that county, a copy of which will be deposited in the national repository digital unit at Kenya Copyright Board. And beyond that, we come in as national government to start to forge partnerships, okay, with the various counties on those documented IK associated assets. How do we start to add value through science and business? Because we have to give life. We have to give life to the documented assets. And that's really what I would like to end on by now recognizing one thing. We can sit here at our age right now and talk about indigenous knowledge, its importance. If we don't bring on board the young Kenyans, entice them and interest them in the whole subject of indigenous knowledge, our very good intentions will end. Which now I end up moderated by recognizing one thing we are doing. We are doing it's live now. That in all the stakeholder consultations that we have been having under this COVID program that I talked about, we are deliberate and conscious in identifying young Kenyans from each ethnic community and from each region. And those are the people that we are going to call young champions, okay, for culture and indigenous knowledge in particular. And we are organizing a big forum in June if the COVID-19 regulations will have ended, so that we have that big forum where we will have young champions from each ethnic community, from each region of Kenya, weighing in on this. And that's the future of indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You must really publicize that and make sure that we come for that. We'll be very, very interested to be a part of that particular thing. Yes, in fact, they've said, the gentleman here called Victor Apollo has said they have cultural days like the Tobong Lore. So how are these cultural days? And I know they're held all over the country. Can we use these cultural days to be able to promote indigenous knowledge? Thank you very much. Honorable Barsosio, I'd like to hear your closing remarks, and then we have our chief guest do the wind up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mwaniki. Today's objective was to deliberate and engage on sustainable solutions that can be drawn from indigenous knowledge to address the issues on climate change as we deal with this COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to give my closing remarks by saying that let us not be slaves of other cultures. Instead, maybe our cultures and the indigenous knowledge that we have might not be different from others, but it might be the best. And on issues of climate change and conservation and protection, it is God's creation. And as God said in the book of Genesis that go ye and fill the world. And as we do this, sometimes I stay back and think about it, and I say, if we cannot be able to utilize some of the resources that we have sustainably, then there is no need for us to do procreation. And for sure, if the issue of sustainability is not taken into consideration, then forever we shall be slaves of other nations and other countries that are doing very well. A country like Malaysia and Finland, for example, are leading in terms of forest and tree cover at around 70%. For us, we are struggling between 6-7% just to achieve 10% of the forest cover in this country. And for sure, if you look at the wood and wood products, majority of the seeds that we use in our offices are from China, Malaysia, and other countries. What is this that we don't have as a country? What is this that we are lacking that we cannot even be able to utilize some of the materials that we need? I want one day we modify the seeds that are used by the elders in Turkana, in Pokot. I don't know the name that they call it. That seed that they always walk around with, and we modify them and use it so that we can be able to promote our indigenous knowledge and cultures in this country. The late Professor Wangare Maathai said, we can sin to God as many times as possible, and God can find a way of forgiving us. But we do it to nature, we sin to nature, and nature doesn't have that chance of forgiving us. Here in Elgeyo Marakwet, at the beginning of last year, we lost around 28 people to floods. In West Pokot, they lost around over 72 people. Out of the 28 that we lost in Elgeyo Marakwet, we could not be able to account for the 22 people. We only buried a few. Others, we had to bury some of the remains, and we could not identify who is this. And for sure, if we are not careful as a country, if we are not able to integrate the scientific knowledge that we have with the traditional knowledge, if we cannot be able as government to talk to our own people and do a lot of sensitization, bring all the stakeholders as we look at this country as one country, then tough times ahead. But I'm optimistic that we can be able to work together so that we can be able to tackle these issues of climate change, just the way in his opening remarks, His Excellency talked of locusts and other pandemics that are eating us so hard. As I close, Mwaniki, COVID is real. Let us be careful. Let us adhere to all the Ministry of Health protocols, and we will live to see tomorrow. Bye-bye, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa. And now, Your Excellency, I think you've heard we wanted to have sustainable solutions. Have we come up? Have we discussed sustainable solutions? And what is your take and your winding thoughts, sir?
Thank you very, very much, everyone. I have to say that we have a great future as a country. Intellectual property is promising, it's rewarding, it's very potentially possible that we can use it to develop this country. We can succeed, all of us, when we work as county governments, as national government. That is very important. And it's good we brought this particular conference, Zoom conference, because
have we lost you, Your Excellency?
Is that okay?
Oh, yes, you're back. You're back. Thank you. You're back now. Yes, go ahead.
So this is a very powerful Zoom conference, and it will make a difference in this country. For us to succeed, we need to work together as county government and national government. Number two, we need both levels of government to avail funding for research. That is key. No country develops without research. Number three, we need capacity building for inventors on patenting and intellectual property. That is the missing link. You've had people have things that they don't know what to do with, which they lose to foreigners. So if we develop capacity, we can certainly do better. Number four, we need to facilitate the patent office on both patenting and enforcement. Usually when patents are availed, the office has to have capacity to enforce laws on whoever plagiarizes a Kenyan patent. So that is very important. And then finally, we've been talking today, talking again another time, we'll be talking another time. Let us move from talking to working to implement what we've discussed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. As we learned earlier, you definitely are very passionate about this field. You're knowledgeable about it, and And not only are you very good at this, but you're also very good at politics as well, because you've managed the resources of Kericho now for two terms. So we're quite excited that you were able to take time to be part of this. I would like to invite Rosemary Njaramba, and I think I told you who she is earlier. She's the head of planning and strategy, knowledge management and monitoring and evaluation here at the Council of Governors. Council, this is at the office here in Nairobi. And I would like her to give a vote of thanks. And immediately after she finishes, I will give a summary. We actually have a summary of what we think the way forward is officially, the one that shall be officially tabled and as a result of this very engaging session that we've had together. So Rosemary, if you're there, please go ahead and give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mwaniki. You can hear me?
We can hear you, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you to everyone who was here with us today. I'd like to say thank you to you, Mwaniki, for ably moderating this session. I think this has been, I've learned so much. It's been so insightful, such rich discussions, such able panelists. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Esther Matu, Mr. Kimaren from ILEPA, Mr. Lerenten from the Climate Change Directorate, the CEC from Elgeyo Marakwet, who has ably represented the voice of counties, Dr. Evans Taracha from the National Museums of Kenya, and of course, finally, Your Excellency, Professor Paul Chepkony, for very, very rich discussions, very insightful. If anybody missed this, I don't know where else they were. So this has been a very, very useful engagement. I'd like to say thank you to all of them. Thank you to all our attendees, everybody who took time to join us during this webinar. We don't take it for granted. We thank you so very much. The rest of the team from COG, our IT team who have been there to provide support, Dora who took a lot of time to put this together, and Jane and Ken, and everybody else who really took time to make sure that this happens. For the guidance and support of our CEO, we'd like to say thank you so much, Madam Mugeni, for your support for us to have this webinar. We thank you very much. Thank you so much to everyone, for all of us, for being here for the 2.5 hours? Yes, 2.5 hours, we've all been here. Thank you very much. We really appreciate this from the Council of Governors. Asanteni sana. And over back to you, Mwaniki, to just wind up, read the recommendations very quickly, and then we release everyone. Asanteni.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so those have been sent to me. Thank you, Rosemary. I actually might come back to you to do the closing prayer now that you're there. But I'd just like to read what we have pretty much gone through. As you knew, our sub-theme was Enlivening and Integrating Indigenous Knowledge in Climate Action at the subnational level in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And our objective today was to deliberate and engage in sustainable solutions that can be drawn from the indigenous knowledge to address climate change in this period of the pandemic. Now, the national government and the county government and county governments, these are the recommendations. The national government and county governments to work collaboratively in identifying, protecting, and storing existing indigenous knowledge in the National Digital Repository. Secondly, the national government and county governments to work collaboratively with local communities to facilitate patenting of indigenous knowledge and products. That's patenting. Counties to deliberate allocated government resources, allocated budget resources to promote, protect, and replicate and scale up climate change solutions emerging from indigenous knowledge as part of mainstream programs. Then county governments to nominate indigenous knowledge focal points to champions of indigenous knowledge systems with stakeholders at the grassroots level. Then we have county governments to work collaboratively with stakeholders at both levels of government in designing of projects and programs that integrate indigenous knowledge systems to promote livelihoods. Then the Council of Governors to work collaboratively with the national government agencies, development partners, civic society organizations, and the private sector to facilitate forums that promote indigenous knowledge. And finally, county governments to work with national government agencies, civil society organizations, and development partners and private sector to work collaboratively in the implementing existing policy and legislation on indigenous knowledge and further domesticate the national policies. So those are, in short, what we have will be written down and tabled. The the recorded version of this shall be available. And I think some of you have given us your email addresses. Some of them, the link will be sent to you, but it will be available on the COG website, and you can refer to it at any point and share with all your friends as far and as wide as you can, so that you can be able to continue this conversation. Right, so please remember that we are hoping to hold the 7th annual devolution conference in Makueni as soon as we are allowed to meet together. It was scheduled for May, beginning of May, and we hope that it still stands, but we shall know once the country has been reopened by His Excellency the President. So we're looking forward to the devolution conference because we shall be able to talk about this further and in further depth, and also be able to see how far have we gone in terms of making it a reality from these resolutions that we've made today. And with that, my name is Monique Magere. I've really enjoyed this. I would like to ask Rosemary to say the closing prayer, and then we shall release everybody. And thank you for such an engaging and exciting webinar.
Okay, thank you, Monique. Let's all pray. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for this afternoon that we were able to gather together to discuss a very, very important subject to the livelihoods of very many people in this country. Lord, we pray that whatever resolutions we've made here today and recommendations, that God, you will give us a strength, you will give us the motivation to move this conversation into action. So Lord, we thank you so much. We thank you for each and every person who participated here today. And we ask for your protection as we go along on the rest of our day. We seek your protection over this country, Lord, and we just want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you. And Lord, we pray that those who are traveling, protect them, oh God, and just be with all our families. In Jesus' name, we pray and believe. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rosemary and Jaramba. Nobody thanked you. Thank you for your good work as well. And with that, thank you very much, Council of Governors.
Thank everybody for good moderation. Thank you.
Keep safe, guys. Keep safe. COVID is actually very real.
Well done, our moderator.
Thank you.
Everyone
Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you so much. Very much.
Wonderful job.
Bye-bye. I'll be looking for you when I come to Gelmarakwet.
And we need to cook with you. We need to cook with you.
Yes, yes, we must. Last time I was there, I was at Tot. We went to Tot.
Okay, bye, everyone.
God bless you all.
Bye, everyone.
All right, see you. Bye.